that there is an alien spaceship trailing behind the Hale-Bopp comet. Would you like to leave all your friends and family behind for said spaceship? Would you also like to give up drinking, your job, all your money and personal possessions, and your ability to think freely? If you answered yes to all these questions, then the Heaven's Gate cult might be for you. My name is Ellie Martin, and today I'll talk to you about the Heaven's Gate cult, its leaders and beliefs, and the infamous mass suicide. This is Marshall Applewhite. He is the main leader of the cult. He was born May 17th, 1931 in Spur, Texas, and he was married but got a divorce 16 years later, which after he got his divorce, his life kind of began to fall apart. He lost his job at the college in Houston he taught at because of a scandal involving a student, and then he checked himself into a psychiatric hospital in 1970 because he wanted to be cured of his homosexual urges. And then later, he castrated himself because he believed it would be the ultimate freedom from his sexual guilt. 2 years later, he met Bonnie Nettles. She was born in 1927 in Houston, Texas, and was married in 1949 and had 4 kids with that husband. But then 23 years later, she met Marshall Applewhite and divorced him to get with Marshall Applewhite because she believed that she had to pursue her higher purpose with him. She also believed she was in contact with a 19th century monk named Brother Francis, who she thought was her spiritual aid. The two met in 1972 and then married that same year because they felt that they had been linked together in a previous life. And then they believed that they were the two prophesied in Revelation 11 verses 3, which says, "And I will appoint my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth." Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles, because they believed they had a divine purpose, they also believed they were above earthly laws, so they would skip out on paying for things like motel or food. And so then he got arrested for credit card fraud in 1974, and then also for car theft because he picked up a rental car and never returned it because he said, "A force from beyond this earth has made me keep this car." Then they also went by a bunch of different nicknames like Tea and Doe or Bo and Peep. And then there's also Guinea and Pig, which was supposed to be representative of the part that they played in the experiment being conducted by the next level, they called it. I don't know, just okay. So the Heaven's Gate cult manifesto and beliefs were developed while Marshall Applewhite was in prison. And then after he got out 6 months later, they spent the next 5 years traveling cross country to try and recruit new members. And it was slow growth at first, but then they had an upswell in 1975 where they gained 200 new members, according to highropes.org. And then that was too many for them, so they started to enforce stricter beliefs to figure out who their true and dedicated followers were, which ended up in a lot of people leaving them. And then they also got more media exposure through a short TV series called Beyond Human, The Last Call, which got them a few more followers. So the main core belief of Heaven's Gate cult was that there was an alien spaceship trailing behind the Hale-Bopp comet, and that in late March of 1977, when it passed the closest to Earth that it had been in 4,000 years, they had to commit a mass suicide so that their bodies could transcend to the next level and board the spaceship. They also believed in ancient astronauts, which is the belief that aliens planted the seeds of humanity millions of years ago, and they were coming back to reap the harvest and bring the harvest to join the ranks of flying saucer crews. And then the extraterrestrial walk-ins is the belief that your human soul left your body and has been replaced by an alien one, whether that be temporarily or permanently. So then they didn't really consider their suicide to be a suicide, really. They're just them leaving their physical containers down below on the Earth as they went to the alien spaceship. And he also believed that Marshall Applewhite was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, which is how he got such devoted followers. And then he enforced the doctrine of self-denial, which means that they were supposed to forsake anything that tied them to the human level. So they weren't allowed to have contact with non-members, such as family and friends. Wayne and Kelly Cook were members of the cult, and they were in their 20s, and they left their 10-year-old daughter behind for the cult and suicide. And then they're also not allowed to drink or do drugs, and they weren't allowed to have a job, and any money they made had to go to the community treasury. And they weren't allowed to have sex, and 6 members went to the extreme to castrate themselves. And they weren't allowed to have individual revelation or possessions because it was seen as an unnecessary embellishment. And they believed that the earth needs recycling and they didn't want to be here for that process, thus the mass suicide. And so then on March 22nd, 1997, 39 people committed suicide. There were 21 women and 18 men. And they committed suicide in shifts over the course of 3 days by mixing phenobarbital and applesauce and then washing it down with vodka, which made them pass out. And so when they were passed out, they were suffocated with a plastic bag. And then they were all found on a mattress or a cot wearing all black Nike with brand new black Nikes for tennis shoes, and then covered in a 3x3 purple shroud with $5.75 in their pocket, which was supposed to be their airfare for the spaceship, and then a birth certificate, passport, or driver's license, which was supposed to be identifying papers so that the authorities would know who the bodies were. So, Heaven's Gate cult was a religious doomsday cult that was founded on delusions of grandeur that resulted in the deaths of 39 people. But if it sounds like a good fit for you, you can feel free to visit heavensgate.com to learn how you can also advance beyond human and board the spaceship.